Welcome to the Love, Sex, and Leadership podcast, where you can discover simple tantric teachings to embody your true power, awaken your soul's wisdom, and live an inspired life as a natural, intuitive, and heart-centered leader. So welcome everyone to Love, Sex, and Leadership. I am in Bali at the moment and very excited to have my guest Ian-Michael, who is in Costa Rica. He is the CEO of Holos, a beautiful regenerative design community. It's been around for many years. I was there quite a few years back when I was doing some teaching in Costa Rica, and we also have some friends in common. And yeah, I really just appreciate this man for the pillar of community and the pillar of leadership and what that entails in this world. And looking forward to having him here on the show today. So welcome, Ian-Michael. Nice to have you here.
Thank you, Aaron. Great to be here with you.
Yeah. So you're in Costa Rica now, yeah?
I'm in Costa Rica in the Diamante Valley. Yeah, this
Nice.
really amazing place that we steward, full of biodiversity and the wisdom of the waters. We have a really beautiful river flowing through that teaches us a lot. Yeah.
Beautiful. So can you tell me, myself as well as the listeners, a little bit about Holos and what you're up to there and what's kind of the how's it been and what you're developing and creating as time goes on here?
Yeah. Holos was a dream that was born from my desire to move to Central America and steward land and farm and kind of be ready for the disintegration of Western civilization. It was kind of a dream since I was 17, 18 years old in Alaska. And then I merged that dream with the legacy of Stan Groff. He was a transpersonal psychologist, psychiatrist. He did a lot of LSD research, and then he developed a set of teachings around the perinatal matrices, the birth process, and how the echoes of that pattern a lot of our lives and nervous systems. So he wanted to build a center for transpersonal psychology. I wanted to build a community, and we merged those two ideas into this regenerative community that we built down here in Costa Rica. So yeah, we have 200 acres, a big conservation area, a big regenerative farm, a 25-bed retreat center where we've done all kinds of transformational work. And then there's about 40 house sites and about 8 houses built. We've had babies born on the land in the last year, and it's been a long journey. It's been about 5 years now that we've been operating, and it's been a very humbling but rewarding path to build this community. Yeah.
Beautiful. As just over a year ago, we signed on our land in Portugal, so I can appreciate the humbling side of it.
Mhm.
In that humbling leadership, what do you think are some of the biggest lessons you've learned in you could say the leadership that happens intellectually, and then what that looks like into applied day-to-day action?
Yeah, there's this really fascinating balance that you have to strike between tenacity and surrender.
Mm,
And I would say, particularly in Costa Rica, it was a culture that I had gotten to know, and I spent, almost a decade really researching and getting to know the people and finding the right spot for building Holos. But the actual lived reality is very different than what I expected. There's a saying in Costa Rica, pura vida, and that can mean everything. It can mean hello, it can mean goodbye, it can mean everything's going great. But I would say the undercurrent of pura vida, pure life, is just like, don't take things too seriously. And coming from like a Western mind and a builder from Alaska, where it's like you kind of drive and push and have this tenacity, that has been whittled down by the spirit of the country and the people here, but also the jungle. Like, you can't keep up with the jungle. You
mhm.
you can't just like keep cutting it back. You have to surrender into its rhythms. And so yeah, you know.
I'm on my land here in Bali and surrounded by two waterfalls in the jungle. So I definitely appreciating the humbleness of what the jungle is teaching as we're trying to build, and with this outside deck is just being finalized. But yeah, I can appreciate the listening to the wisdom of the jungle.
Yeah, yeah, the land is always teaching me. It's like, does a road want to go here? Nope. And it takes the road out, or we planted 6,000 trees, and it was like, yes, we're going to do all this. We're going to regenerate all this. And it's like, maybe half of them have survived the intensity of the grasses and the seasons and all of the pieces there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess where do you find that like balance? Because I can also appreciate that part of me. Even our project in Portugal to me equals patience. It's like everything slows down the timeline. But there is
Mhm.
that like fiery spirit that wants to create, and it requires, especially in the early years, like a penetrative presence that just needs to stay on it, or nothing will get done. So where
Yeah.
inside of you, especially on a psychological level, do you find that dance or that balance?
I think it's really about that deeper listening and the timing. So, in the north, you've got plants that are kind of gestating beneath the surface as the snow comes. And then when spring comes, it's like, oh, now is time to move, and it's time for the seed to burst and, the plant to grow. And it's similar here in Costa Rica. It's like I just got done with meetings in the municipality, and it was like a 2-year process. And finally, oh, this is what they actually want. And so it's like, okay, the next week is drive and move these things forward, strike while the iron is hot, as they say.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
so I think that's a big part of it is just timing. Sometimes things are not meant to move. And, we just came out of the year of the snake, and it was a lot about shedding and like clarifying and purification. And, they say the year of the fire horse, it's about like the movement forward. And so I'm already feeling that energy, and I've been preparing for it. So, yeah, I think it's just listening to that, and then different seasons for different things. It's like rainy season here, significantly harder to build or to, but it's the time for planting. So it's like really like learning the rhythms of a place. One of my mentors, he said that it takes 3 to 4 years for our biorhythms to sync with the place that we're living in. And
Mm.
for those of us that travel so much and we're, like semi-nomadic, it's like your body is constantly calibrating to what environment it's in. And, in Alaska, it was very clear. It was like summer or winter and a little spring and fall. But your productivity for building houses went down significantly in the winter. So when the spring came, it was like get the foundations in, get the framing up, and go hard. So I think that's a big part of it is, just in our lives and in our endeavors, whatever we're trying to create, they all have a season. And it took 2 or 3 years to move from the idea phase of Holos into like, okay, now we have some investment and we're grounding this and we're buying the land and building the roads. And, so there's all different kinds of periods.
Mm-hmm. Because when you came to that land, it was just pure raw land. Yeah, there was nothing there.
Yeah, there was 2 little cabins and some cow trails, and it was a mix of like forest and then a lot of cattle pasture. And the cattle pastures in these regions up in the mountains are not great for the soil, so there was a lot of work to do in regenerating the soils, and we're on that active path. But no, we put in 3 miles of roads and power lines and water system and wells and houses and a retreat center. And so there was a chapter where we were really in action mode, and then we moved into a phase of more tending and taking care of people and running retreats. And so
Yeah,
it's
great.
been, yeah.
And I'd love to get your perspective on this dance between kind of retreat center and community living. Because one of the things we're doing at our place in Portugal is we have some groups starting, this next May or June. We had a big fire that took out a bit of our land this last year. But really, the vision I've always had is this place between, not a full retreat center and not a full community space. So where do you land in that? Like, do you have people on the property there living full time? You're having retreats all the time? Where is the balance between the two to feel like the retreat center can flourish, but also the community can also flourish? Do you feel like there's enough space there? What are your takes on this dance?
Yeah, we have 200 acres, so there's a lot of room for a lot of multifunctionality. And I'm finding that over time, I lean more and more towards the community aspect and less towards the retreat center,
Hmm.
just because operationally it's so complex. And I was at a retreat center called Esalen Institute in Big Sur, and I was there 4.5 years. And during that time, we also had some natural disasters. There was a bridge that went out, another road that went out. It totally shut down the retreat center. We had to helicopter everybody out. And during that time of challenge, the administration decided that it was like time to basically lay 90% of the people off. And so there was this fabric of pseudo community. Everybody felt like a community, but then we realized, well, it's actually a business. And so there was this dispersion of energy, and it's taken a while for the spirit of the place to like really recover from that moment, I think. And one of the great lessons for me during that time was the importance of community for holding a deeper fabric, people that are
Hmm.
really invested in the place, that build the layer of the psychic like safety for all the guests that come in. So I feel really good about what we're building because there's a good focus on community. Right now, there's 8 houses here. At least half of those are full-time residents, and then the other half are staff and part-time residents. And, the longer term vision that I have is that the community and the retreat center build more together. So, a lot of our community are practitioners, psychologists, breathwork practitioners, there's some chefs. But my hope is that, like, by building the infrastructure of the community in a really strong way, that synergy will very naturally, emerge that'll support the retreat center. And the retreat center supports a huge local community. We're the biggest employer in this little village of San Salvador. And so a lot of the moms and women in the community really rely on us for their income. And so I feel this sense of, I don't know if it's obligation, but like duty to caring for all these families. So there is like an economic engine that's important. And also, I think for any of these communities to really thrive, you do need some form of a driver that connects people. And so we do a lot of events, music, ceremonies, yoga that are opportunities for people to dip in however they want. But you can't really manufacture community. You can't force it into place. I feel like it's something that is an emergent quality of the relational fabric that is built naturally. And so setting up a community or setting up a space that's a retreat center and community in ways that people have these natural convergence points and they can follow their dharma and their own individual interests and find commonality there. So it's really a dance, and that's been one of the rubs at times. It's like the balance between running a business and then the community desire. So we have the retreat centers up on the ridge, this unbelievable, beautiful vista, 600-foot waterfall in the distance, and everybody would like to be there. But then the reality is that there's times where we have to close it for a closed container of people doing deep work with the retreat center, and that's the majority of the time during our high season, like January through February or through June. So my solution to that is that the retreat center is going to have 2 zones, one that can be permeable. People can come in for a night. People from the community can come up. That'll be spa, events, restaurant. And then the closed group containers will move into a different zone where we can have like 20 to 30-person retreats that can be more private, because there is a piece of doing this really deep work, whatever it is, where people want to have this sense of familiarity with their group and not have new energies coming in, and somebody
Mhm,
may be in a
mhm.
really deep process. So it's a pretty constant balance to find the valence points, to like find the concentric circles of like, what is needed at any given time. So it's pretty dynamic.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can feel the thought process inside of that, and I guess, from a functionality and kind of growth side, do you see a lot of financial return from the community side? Because this is, I feel like, where a lot of communities kind of fall apart over time, is that they want to come together, but then don't always have some type of ROI that's bringing money in the door. And then if
Right.
it's just the retreat center, I mean, I'm usually running 15 to 20 retreats around the world. So I see a lot of beautiful, amazing places, but there's no life force outside of just the retreat that's there for the week. So like,
Mhm.
do you have things in mind in what you're saying to kind of bring more the vitality and the aliveness, especially on an economic level from the community side.
Yeah, it's something I've spent a lot of time contemplating, like how to inspire people to bring their gifts forward and create entrepreneurial endeavors. And I think that's something that we still have to develop as a community. Like basically, you could call it an incubator, but like creative time where we can collaborate and talk about each other's gifts. And like, we've got these amazing chefs, had a very high-end restaurant in California, basically retired and moved here. But it's like now they're settled, they've got their house, and they're looking for like, okay, well, how do we apply ourselves? So maybe they build kind of a cottage industry around their skill set. We have others who are like a psychologist that has a podcast and brings in guests that are either community members or visiting teachers. And we're trying to build those creative ways. And then we have this thriving farm, but it's not thriving to the extent that we can like build products yet. But that's
Hmm.
a big
Hmm.
curiosity to me of like, how do we build, it doesn't even have to be Holos branded, but relevant products for this region or even beyond here. So yeah, those are all things that I'm actively thinking about because the retreat center model is, it's limited. Some retreat leaders really make a good living, but I would say the majority are doing it as like a side project and something they're passionate about. And the retreat centers themselves, after working decades in retreat centers, most of them are like pretty marginal economic activity. It's like just enough to cover all the expenses. And
Hmm. Hmm.
especially, like the labor costs in Costa Rica are much higher than what I expected, and just the cost of doing business. Portugal, maybe a little bit less. Bali, is fortunate because like you have a lot of incredibly skilled people that you can employ and support your endeavors, but that's pretty rare in the world. And then the economics of that always catches up to you at some point. So, you know, I think it's going to be a really interesting chapter as job markets in general change with AI and all these different pieces. It's like, okay, well, what endeavors can the human do that are really worthwhile? And
Hmm.
some of
Hmm.
that I think is the soft skills, but AI is also becoming great at being a therapist, and like a lot of people are using that as as their means of support.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a fascinating moment to think like in terms of, okay, as community, what value are we bringing to the world that's really unique?
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm very active in that contemplation. I'd love to hear your thoughts too, like how you guys are thinking about that in terms of the long-term sustainability of your project. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with Portugal, what I've kind of envisioned there initially was a balance between both. In the higher seasons, summertime, we'd have more groups and things happening, but I never wanted to see it a place that we're holding um, week by week by week retreats. And also the mindset that we've had on the community side, and I'm still kind of exploring this. We are, I mean, we're a group of about, 10, 12 founders right now, and still space for more, is not like kind of a nomadic soul sanctuary. So less about like people living there full time year round. Almost everyone who's coming in, they have a home in Israel or a home in the US, or like myself, my partner and I have a home in Bali and in Spain. So it's more about like when you're coming in, you're in this time of community and connection, and what are the projects we're working on, what are the things that we're doing, and then that's for a given amount of time, whether it be a month or 4 or 5 months, but there's an awareness that there's another like space outside of that. And because I find one of the things I've seen with long-term community is that there's often, like looking at some of the more ones that have fallen apart a little bit in the last couple of years, like there's this mindset of I'm here, and well, who are these new people coming in, and almost like this kind of righteousness that develops over time. So I
Mhm.
was thinking that with more of that like nomadic soul sanctuary, someone's here and they have a typical room or home that they're normally going and staying in, but there's a little bit more fluidity in it. So it's really a more
Mhm.
community immersive experience when you're in that, but it's not necessarily something you're in year round. So I feel like it takes more of the flavor of what community is, and rather than just, Because the other thing I've seen, I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that I've seen in Costa Rica, and I didn't feel it in Holos, but there's a number of community places that are like advertising as community, but when I went to visit them, they just felt like a big like residential area where you don't even actually know your neighbors, and you're calling
Mhm.
it community, which is a great start other than just, an apartment in New York City. It's like there's a common garden and stuff, but I didn't quite feel this place of like woven community. It was like, oh yeah, I don't really know my neighbor, but we're in community together. It felt a little bit strange in that way, when it was just like residential things,
Yeah.
blocks that people were buying because some big enterprise was selling it as community, as a new way of going. And I'd love to hear your, so I know there's quite a bit of that in Costa Rica, especially for Americans that want the community dream, and they're going down there and doing that, but it kind of just feels like residential living.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that. I think a little bit in terms of like attractor fields. So, how do you build a community or a place that will bring people together spontaneously? And that's how you get to know your neighbors and start to support each other. And then also, like you can kind of help support that through things like men's groups, women's groups, all of those kind of things. And your model is really interesting to me because of people coming in and having like a soul sanctuary where, you kind of know the fabric of the community, but you're all still weaving something bigger in the world. And we definitely have that. I think one of the things that's really important is that a community doesn't get too stagnant. So, like, if you just have residential home after residential home and people living their lives, there's a certain stagnation. And so, one way that we help shake that up is we have a service program. So we have guests that stay for a month, 3 months, 6 months, and they come help work on the farm or the retreat center. And they always bring really good energy, and they'll come back year after year or like, stay connected to the web. And so I think bringing fresh energy in is super important, or else you end up kind of in that place where it's like everybody gets into their rhythm and their life and they kind of forget about the importance of those relationships. So yeah, that's a really interesting inquiry. We're so boutique, like we don't have a lot of homes yet built, and even the folks that haven't yet built their homes, they stay very connected. They'll come for visits, and like they may not be building for a few years, but they definitely feel part of the network of people. And
Mm.
we also never really actively advertised for the community. We always like it was always relationship based. So somebody owns a house here or somebody's part of a retreat. And it's like there's a hidden fabric that keeps everybody kind of on the same wavelength. And so
Hmm.
there's already
Hmm.
built in like shared values because of that.
Yeah, beautiful. You mentioned the kind of in-house volunteer, that space. We have people that come, sometimes we've worked with these outside agencies, also just through word of mouth. And we've looked at different models where they're, sometimes paying a certain amount every day to cover their, basic, food essentially. And then
Mm.
other models where we're then covering it. When you're doing this kind of 1 or 2 or 3 month kind of in residency, what's the model that you're holding for that? And do you feel like that's working, or is there some fine tuning with that?
Well, we're definitely subsidizing it. So, we have people pay a small stipend just to like lock in per month. So we
Hmm.
know they're serious. But I think that folks don't understand that there's actually real operating costs. Like, we have to replace the tents or like build new accommodations, the food system and all of the farm that we have that they partake in. Replacing washers and dryers and like the things that are not that interesting, but they're actually real costs. For me, it's like I'm happy to see the organization support those young people, or not even necessarily young people, but like enthusiastic people that want to come feel what it is to be in community, maybe bring their gifts. So we definitely subsidize it. When I was at Esalen, they had a really extensive what they called work scholar program. So people would pay a significant amount, like $500 to $1,000 a month, and they would receive both teachings and then also do 20 to 30 hours of work a week in various departments. And that was a much bigger, more refined system. But I do know that it's a lot to bring volunteers on, or even folks like that are paying to be there, like the training, just the upkeep. And so Yeah, it's going to be interesting to hear in a couple of years like what really lands for you too, because
Mm,
we're all kind of in the experiment of what really works, you know. But
for sure.
there's so many people in the world that are wanting and needing community for their own like psychological well-being, and there's so many people that are curious about how do I get out of my city life and like, oh, this is a good landing place where I can, you know, try it out. And we end up having to hold a lot of space for those folks because like, I mean, some people are more mature than others, but like it's not an easy transition to go from living in a city in Europe or the US or Canada to living in the rainforest and like being, you know, the whole thing, you know, living with bugs and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's been part of our process in this first year is like the sort of vetting process for people coming in. Initially, we had this whole long, extensive application that really just that in of itself kind of cleared the way of things. And then we, after the fire and the floods, and we just needed more hands on the ground to handle all the things there of the land. We took a lot more, essentially woofers and things like that. And that, brought a different
Mhm.
dynamic where they were connected to the land, but didn't quite have the interpersonal psychology pieces. So then there was a lot of like, wow, you don't necessarily have the same tools of emotional relating and taking sovereignty and responsibility. So then it became sometimes like this almost retreat like setup where we're teaching and then yeah, it's a very
Mhm.
interesting dance when someone's coming in with inspirations to be in community, but haven't necessarily done the groundwork foundations to know what it means to interact with others in a conscious way.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, during my tenure at Esalen, I was fortunate to be there during a time that they had a very active Gestalt practice. So every
Mm,
department and the work scholars and administration, we all had process groups that were like weekly or bi-weekly, and then larger community Gestalt processes. And there was very specific like techniques and ways that the facilitators would help people build their psychological resilience and skills and, you know, ownership of their emotions and all of these things. And I haven't had the chance to build that like community psychological infrastructure here yet. I've been in like physical builder mode, but
mhm,
that's definitely something that's nascent, and a huge desire of mine is like for people to get a taste of, you know, these skills that we already have because we've spent a lot of time in these worlds of conscious communication and authentic relating and all of these different pieces. So yeah, it's very much on my mind because if you can build those like circles that are just part of the culture, then it's like somebody can kind of drop in and and held in a container so that whatever their personal process is, it doesn't kind of leak into the larger group. So
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Yeah, no, for sure. It's like the place of supporting psychological work, but not necessarily making it so intense where people feel like they're in process all the time.
Mhm,
And I guess a question to that, because I know you're also at Holos working with, plant medicine sometimes, and I'd love to
mhm.
hear your takes on that, especially how you feel when like a retreat that's maybe working with plant medicine as compared to one that's not, how you feel like that impacts the kind of psychosomatic field also inside the community, people that are living there.
Mhm.
And, what's the kind of impact of that, especially for some people who haven't necessarily had experience with plant medicine who might be around in that sphere, because that's obviously opening a lot of psychic and somatic gateways that a lot of people might not be familiar with.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, fortunately, that's usually a very contained experience up in the retreat center that's pretty separate from the zone that's the community zone. But we've had, you know, a huge array of different practices and practitioners that have rented out our space. And over the years, I've just gotten much more diligent about who do we work with and who do we rent to. And it's very complex. Like when you're opening all of these different gateways, and every medicine has kind of their own challenges and opportunities, or I would say like ways that it needs to be held. And most of the work that's done at the retreat center is through different indigenous lineages. And there's a huge translation issue that I think is happening in the psychedelic world, where some of these practices, ayahuasca, peyote, San Pedro, they were in a very particular community context where everybody was kind of looking out for one another, and they already had a cultural context where those medicines made sense. And so when people come from like a city or a Western context, they step into these really big, expansive states. It's like, it's quite challenging to make their way back into the world. And the practitioners are often not well trained in like what they're working with, the different traumas that they're working with, et cetera. And
Mhm,
so I've
mhm,
gotten like more and more and more conservative over the years of like who is allowed to use our space, and even moving more and more away from the plant medicine work. It's like we have opportunities during the year, like we have an annual peyote ceremony where we bring folks from Mexico that have a 5,000-year lineage of working with this medicine. And it's a very community oriented, very festive, sweet gathering. But sometimes people go really deep. And like my last week has been helping tend to one young woman who it's like that cracked her reality pretty deep. And so,
mhm, mhm,
she's like, she's finding her ground and it's all going to be fine. But that takes a lot of tending. And I would say that in the majority of the psychedelic work happening, there's not that strong of integration and preparation,
mhm,
not even because of the practitioners, but because of the participants not understanding the importance of that. So like
mhm,
we'll give out workbooks, we'll have like integration circles and integration calls after. And even with all of that, people sometimes choose not to participate. And because they don't even know what to do with the content that they've just encountered. So
mhm,
yeah, I've gotten more conservative over the years. And Stan Grof's legacy also tracks that a little bit. He did really deep LSD research in the Czech Republic, which was like very clinical. And then he ended up going on to building, a legacy of holotropic breath work and the Grof breath work. So but even breath work I've had breath work experiences that go, as deep as any plant medicine. I've had somatic practices that go almost as deep as any plant medicine. I've had like psycho drama kind of groups that have gone as deep as any plant medicine. So any of these tools that we're using to unlock trauma and the psyche have the potential for like, real ramifications for people. And the infrastructure of our communities more broadly globally are not set up well to hold people that are going through a psychological, you could call it a crisis, but like, yeah, we're just not set up that way anymore. So yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I'm not working with plant medicine professionally, but certainly on the psychosomatic side, I see a lot of deep breakthroughs that happens inside the retreat, and the integration conversation is always the most relevant to me, and especially in those who are working with plant medicine. I feel like it's not strong enough because the it's like the the stairway to the moon is built, but not necessarily how to come back. And I think this is relevant, obviously, for community living and too. Yeah, just a little shift gears of ways. Being also a American and grew up in Alaska, and seeing the kind of current state of it's a whole big bubble we could go into. But I'm curious from your side, and being in Costa Rica and seeing the social, the political, the economic side of what's existing in the U.S. right now. It's a very alive conversation.
Mhm.
What's your take, as well as how it impacts the bigger vision of what you're holding at Holos, and just sort of the community, visionary aliveness of what's happening in our world? I mean, I see a lot of systems falling apart, and a lot of people actually recognizing the massive disillusionment that the world has been inside of. So I'd love to hear some of what you're witnessing, you're seeing inside of the larger kind of socio-economic collapsing things that we're seeing right now in the world.
Yeah, like I was sharing, the original impetus or interest of me moving to Central America was to be able to farm and like ride out whatever's happening for humanity economically and ecologically.
Mm.
Because from Alaska, like in the middle of winter, you're like faced with death every day because it's so cold and dark. And then you're looking down at the planet and you're watching the patterns of all the humans, and you're like, oh wow, people are headed in a direction that is going to be pretty painful. It's kind of like a collective suicide that people are not paying attention to. So this was meant to be a sanctuary for that. And we've always had the intention of having a center, at least in the US and Canada. And there's also been actually a lot of momentum for something in Portugal or in Europe somewhere. And um, I was first here like living during the pandemic. So I had this primer of what is it going to be like when things get really weird in the rest of the world. And it was fairly peaceful. Like we had good food supply. I could go down to the river every day and play in waterfalls, and like we were very much protected energetically. And at the same time, I was like doom scrolling through the death, like numbers and what's happening in the US. I had two kids that I was separated from that I like couldn't get back to. The border actually closed, so it was like there was no flights. So when I got back up there and checked on my kids and spent time with them, it became very evident that all of our lives needed to shift, because it was like the contrast between my life here and what was happening in the US was really stark. And the same is really true now. It's like I can watch what's happening on the news, and it's like it's kind of a horror movie. But then when I actually go up and I spend time in the US, I just moved my daughter to Florida. It's like you can actually feel the density of it psychically or somatically. It's like people are on edge and there's a lot more conflict, like just in the air. Um, and so my hope is that places like this help people build resilience, where they know there's an alternative. Their nervous system has an opportunity to like down regulate and to feel safe, and then take that home and find practices for doing that there. But I think that we're in this point where it's like it's all coming to the surface, all of the shadows, and the opportunity there is to stare them in the face and like recognize, where does that exist inside of me, and what can I do to transform that, and then be an active change agent. Because it's going to I think it's going to get like much gnarlier than it is right now. And
Mhm. Mhm.
there are places where people are right there, where wars are happening and there's devastating things happening. But I think that the general like Western culture is finally feeling the things that a lot of other countries have felt for decades. And yeah, so it's like a reckoning time.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think that the more that we can support one another. I just found this thing. I was like scrolling through old Facebook stuff because I was looking for an old moment when I came to Envision Festival, and I found this like thing that my daughter had from when she was 6. She went to school and she like painted on this piece of paper, and it said, "Don't fight the patriarchy alone. Make friends." And I think like that was a good message for me at this moment. It's like, okay, well, how do we kind of like band together and build our practices so strong, and our like culture and our story so strong, that like it becomes a really good replacement for the story that's crumbling. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, I love that. I love that she was doing that at 6 years old. Um, yeah, I'd love to actually hear some of your journey with fatherhood. I have a 6-month-old now, and just a very fresh father. Obviously, you've been doing it for a while, and also how
Yeah.
your take on, sounds like you just moved your daughter to Florida, and where's the place of, has she spent some time with you at Holos? Was there an idea of her living down there? Like, where are you, what's your ideas around more the kind of educational systems for the youth around community, and around more, there's a lot of great, more natural or educational systems that are good outside of just the public school systems. But yeah, I'd love to hear some of
Mhm.
your insights, as well as maybe where your edges are right now as a father, and what you're leaning
Totally.
into.
Yeah, my girls are 14 and 20, and so they're both on like different arcs of their journey. But I think the commonality is that a lot of kids these days really don't know what to do, with the current moment and like where to put their attention because things are shifting so quickly. And I was just holding my daughter through, and my 14-year-old through the experience of going back to school, like she's in a Waldorf school after 4 years of homeschool. And she was just like, we're wasting so much time. And like, what's the whole point? Just so that I can go to a good college, so that I can get a job, which is going to be irrelevant and just be part of the system. And like, it was a really real moment. And she had a lot of really valid insights that I couldn't, I can't say like, oh, yeah, that's the path that makes sense because I didn't follow that path.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talked to my 20-year-old about like what's happening ecologically in the world, she's like, what do I do? Like it's there's like these issues that we're being presented with through news, but that are actually happening globally are in unfathomable for like for a lot of humans to process. Where do I even plug myself into the current moment of what's happening in the world? So I
Mm-hmm.
think that a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids are facing that existentially, and it's something that my friends and I contemplated in our teen years, but it was never like this in your face. And you know so I think that there's, everybody has their different skill sets and what to focus on and what they're passionate about. But my 14-year-old's mom and I can both agree that like her learning about farming and the arts and like just like get the basics down and then learn some really like hard skills of how to live as a human. Like those are really important things. So she has a really amazing farm at her Waldorf school in Florida. And like I was able to talk to the farm teacher and be like, oh yeah, I have this and that and all these things. So she'll come here in June and she'll be like able to help me plant trees and garden and so that feels really good. But I'm at a loss as a father at the moment on like where exactly to help her direct her attention. It's like I can help her with biochemistry, and that's great, and like it's probably going to be helpful. But I'm really encouraging her in her music and like write art and just learn to be expressive and learn to like
Mm.
think creatively, and like I think those skills of adaptation are going to be as or more important than kind of what all the old hard skills were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And like my 20-year-old, she loves playing video games. She can, build her own computer. And it's like, I played a lot of video games. I think it probably like if you don't get sucked in too deep down that system, it probably builds like capacity to respond to things quickly and like the world that we're moving into. So, I take a fairly like humble stance on all of that and like what they're choosing to focus on, and then help them be really good heart-centered human beings. I think like
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
capacity, like the relational skills are the things that you learn through school, through proximity to other kids, but I think it's something that is best taught at home. Like
Mm.
that's really like, can you express yourself, and can you really listen to somebody else's perspective and hold that dichotomy with your perspective. And yeah, that's kind of the approach that I'm taking at this moment. And then just know that, giving them a safe base where they know they're loved, they can like come down here anytime if things get really weird wherever they are, like they've got a room down here. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think like a kid knowing that there's a safe place in the world for them is really important right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I also feel with all of the development of AI and, just the amount of screen time that children, face, and it's a conversation alive for my partner and I, like, obviously our son is very little, but as he's getting older, like, where's that healthy relationship between, knowing technology but not being completely sucked into it, which is really what the algorithms all support. And I see some of my younger nephews, and they have a very strong relationship with, screen and iPad, and it's just like this whole vortex that gets sucked into that. I feel like almost, I want to say, inhibits the human experience in a way, because but that's also the experience that so much of this younger generation is being webbed into. It really makes
Yeah.
puts questions in my brain, like where we're actually at in 10 years from now and 20 years from now, especially with the development of AI. It's such a unknown piece that's just taking jobs away and taking away this human capacity of interaction that we have, that was really the web of community, that was a web of connection, that's being, removed by this device that is so woven into our world.
Yeah. You know, I think you're probably similar age. I'm 43, and so we were kind of like analog babies. And then there was the digital natives. And it's like, I don't know if anybody's been talking about this, but there's going to be AI natives, which your
Mm.
son is one of them, where it's like his whole reality will be in a world where AI is a big factor. And so there's a lot of curiosity what that will look like. And I've bumped up against it with my girls. Like the first major, or one major rupture I had with my 20-year-old when she was like 14, was at Thanksgiving, where it's like, you need to put your device down, and she's like looped, like really addicted to this thing, and my younger daughter now, it's like, you got to stop watching YouTube videos till 2 in the morning because you have school at 8 in the morning, So
Mm-hmm,
it's
mm-hmm.
like, it's really addictive. And, what I've started to do is like, okay, well, I certainly get looped in and I certainly get addicted. And it's like, I have to address that first and be a really good model. And then I can actually stand on some solid ground when I say it's time to stop.
For sure, for sure. The addiction of the algorithms of social media and what they do to pull in. Yeah, I'm the same age. I'm 43 in 2 weeks, so
Mhm.
beginning of March. But yeah, it's really, to me, I mean, one of the reasons I have all of these lands so far away from, people and just surrounded with nature, is to really web that lifestyle of nature into it. And it almost reminds me of all of these big, the movies that we see, the sci-fi movies, where there's this separation in society. It's like the technocratic world that lives fully more into the AI city, and then there's the other, kind of land-based people that, slide away. And I hate to see that separation happening, but it almost seems like it's happening before our eyes. Like there's the dance in between, but there's those individuals that are just completely growing up and living in concrete jungles and, connected to their iPhone at 1 years old, and that's their life.
Yeah.
It's a very different reality.
Yeah, one thing that I'm appreciating about the rainforest, as we talk about this, is like, it's so alive. It captures your attention in a similar way. And like, I had a guest a couple days ago in my Airbnb down by a waterfall that took a picture of a massive jaguar looking through the window at him. And like, that doesn't happen every day, but like, that's magical. Or I saw this king vulture the other day. It's like, oh my God, I've never seen that. And like, my mom will come and she'll bird watch and she'll see like 30 different species in one day. And that's just kind of like a microcosm of the way the indigenous people would engage with the landscape. And so we work a lot with the Baruka people who originally lived in this valley, and we, employ them as farmers and artists and all these things. And like, these young men and women know so much. Like, they can walk into the forest and read the forest just like, somebody could read an iPad and be like, oh, that's really good for your kidneys. If you have an earache, go get that. And it's like, that's kind of a fun discovery too. Like, if you can be in an environment and like create that much wonderment, that like you engage to the level that you engage as with an iPad in the landscape, and like start to get really curious, I think that's one way that we can shift things, like get curious and go back into the wonderment of the natural world, and have teachers and teachings that help us weave the fabric of our consciousness back into the animate world instead of the digital world.
I love that. Yeah, it reminds me, I'm taking my little one on walks a lot, and just having him on my chest. And as soon as he gets outside and sees the jungle, his eyes get all big, and he's like, just like soaking it all in. It's remarkable. Even sometimes if he's a little fussy in the house right now, I'll take him outside. As soon as he sees the jungle, he just like silent and still and just takes it all. It's so beautiful to witness.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, and
Yeah.
those imprints will really pattern, they're so neuroplastic when they're that little. It's really going to pattern him like that's what he'll want to turn to. Like, oh, when you get older, instead of turning on to the device, it's like, hey, can I go outside and, run around or play with bugs or yeah.
Yeah, yeah, get some jungle imprint.
Yeah.
So for you and moving forward into this new year and both with Holos as well as kind of, personal and professional endeavors, what's on your list? What are you moving into? What's exciting? What's new?
Yeah, I've been building a house, which has been a really beautiful project, but it became like an art project, and so it took me to the edge of my finances and all of the things. But I'm kind of getting to the end of that, and that'll be a relief. Holos, I have all these designs and things that we intend to build a really beautiful spa and rebuild the kitchen roof. So there's like infrastructure things because I'm a builder. That's what I like to do. And then I feel like all of those things, the refinement of my physical world is also reflected in the refinement of my psychological world. So I just finished a very beautiful long relationship like 6 months ago. And I feel like now I've found new ground where I'm like, okay, I'm stable and ready for another level of partnership. And then I want to deepen my relationship with my kids a lot this year. That's
Mm,
really important to me. And every chapter is really a new chapter. Like you get to meet a new person. It's like this little 6-month-old person is like the biggest gift in the world and opens a certain portal of your being. And then like the 14-year-old version and the 20-year-old version, they're all like nuanced in what they can reflect and how I can learn about myself. So
mhm.
yeah, I think as the busy season gets done here in June, I think that's going to be a big focus for me this summer and fall is just like, yeah, deepen my relationship with them. And like, if my daughter's learning guitar, maybe I can learn guitar with her because, it's something I've been curious about. So yeah. And I've been in builder mode and like CEO mode, and some of that's a little tiring. I want to like move back into mystic and like artist and poet and really see what wants to come through programmatically for Holos, like weave the infrastructure with great teachers and have a really epic next year. So
Mm.
yeah, there's something that wants to be birthed through Holos in terms of like some form of a teaching or like curriculum. And so I'm excited to look at that and build that and really honor Stan Groff's legacy. He's 95 now and he was here last year, and he's just got such a breadth of people that have built upon his insights, and so I want to weave deeper in that community.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
Your reference as the builder, I find as soon as my literal boots are on the ground in Portugal, I'm in that like building and managing and handling the water systems and electric systems and all of that, just because I have that background in shipping. And I find when I'm here in Bali, like I get to actually, I have a lot of Balinese building things for me, and I don't have to be as much in that. And it's a very, I think it's both a relief for me as well as for my partner, who like sees me, when I'm in Portugal, it's like I'm doing my web stuff and my clients, and then as soon as I'm done, I'm like, work boots are
Mhm.
on and they're working till sunset. So it's a it's a nice
Yeah.
change to have a little bit more of the mystic jungle time for sure.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And where are you guys at with your project? Because I know you had such a big setback and challenge with the fire, and like, how are things going?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, the house that, yeah, we had been living in, we had actually just fully moved into it about, 2 weeks before the fire hit, moved all of our stuff there. So it was a good exercise in death and rebirth, because all of my belongings that I had all brought to Portugal, we were settling in there, just burned everything in the fire, including our like baby bag for all of the stuff for our newborn that came 2.5 weeks after the fire.
Oof.
Um, so that was a deep humbling moment for sure. And then just a couple months later, like as the rains came in and all of because we're in a valley, so we're on a lot of hills around us, the floods came in and things flooded that we didn't even know it could flood. And then recently, in the last month or two, when I've been here in Bali, big hurricanes have been going through all of Portugal, like causing massive destruction. So we've met the elements this year, that's for sure. And I think it's sort of almost feels like a test from Mother Nature of like, how committed are you on this thing?
Yeah.
But we actually, in a couple of days, we're just about to start the build of our a beautiful 12-meter dome that's going to go down in the river. So we'll have that for our group starting in May. We have a permaculture design group coming in. I'm running a couple of my men's retreats at the beginning of June. So our timelines have been pushed back. We have in the next couple of months, we have a few, potential founders and investors coming for a visit of the land. So things are still moving ahead. Everything just back probably a good 6 to 12 months on where we wanted to be at this time. But I think, Portugal, from a paperwork side, from everything side, it's really the forgotten stepchild of Europe that just works on an entirely different pace. And I'm used to it in Bali, just every timeline's never existing and
Yeah.
things taking a while. So I'm okay with it. But I expected a little bit more in Portugal, but it's not. It's like everything is this number of stories I could tell of just like the paperwork things side of things are like in the 1960s. It's pretty
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
So we're moving ahead. The project is continuing. We'll have some groups and events through this summertime. We have more, community inspiration. I've always felt we bring in around 20 to 25 kind of founding members. We also have a river running through the property, several waterfalls on the land. There's a ruin right across the river that's one of our kind of phase 4 or 5 development. So yeah, it's a lot of trust. It's just trusting as the finances and the inspiration and the people come through and they feel the potency of the land. We also do have an alternative kind of Waldorf type school right down the street from us as well, which,
Nice.
depending on where my partner and I are at in a couple of years, we might, put our little one in there, and we'll probably be bringing in another child in the next year or two, I'd say. So yeah, they're moving ahead. And I think we're grateful to have a place like here in Bali that we can have stillness and quiet outside of all the hustle and bustle of community, and
Yeah.
also a beautiful home in the south of Spain that's kind of the same for us. So it
Yeah.
feels like a nice dance and balance in that way. Yeah. And certainly if
Nice.
you're out in Portugal land, come have a visit. I'd love to have you.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Any
And yeah, I remember seeing the photos, and I have this waterfall fetish, so I would love to come meet your waters.
yeah. I think we're similar in that. Like I actually, one of the waterfalls in my property here in Bali, I didn't even know it was here when I found the land. There's like 3 waterfalls I can see from my master bedroom here on the land. So I'm surrounded by water here, and then in Portugal, it's it's the same. It's a beautiful waterfall valley that we're in, and just amazing. And well, I think what's amazing there, and maybe you've seen some land like this, is probably about 800-900 years ago, when the Moors were really developing that land. Some of the integrated like schist walls that they built there I actually don't even understand how they built it. Like there's one wall that's about probably 20 meters high that's next to the waterfall that it's literally holding the entire piece of land. And like, how on earth was that even like built with the technology that they had? So it's quite
Yeah.
remarkable, that land and the history that it holds. And I think we're doing it, the best of our ability to hold the reverence of that and kind of keep a new spirit of what's alive to give back to the land. The 2 pieces of that project is body and land. It's like, what's the relationship to the body and what's your relationship to land, and how can we weave that together more beautifully?
I love that. Yeah, those are
Yeah.
definitely analogous. And yeah, I would love to learn more from you about your somatic practices too. So if I come, that'll be a good opportunity.
For sure. You have some travel on your schedule this next year?
Yeah. My daughter has been trying to move to Italy, the one that I just got to Florida. So if her mom relocates there, I'll help her go settle in for a little bit.
Cool.
And then Corfu has been calling me, and the festival that happens down there, Colibri.
Mm.
Those guys came and visited years ago and thought about settling in Costa Rica, and a lot of interesting people are choosing to be down there. So, yeah, those are the primary travels. And then I need mountain time, so similar to you taking a break and going to Bali. I am going to go spend some time in British Columbia because there's a range of mountains there that just reignite my soul in a particular way. So,
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, I'll be in spending about a month in Cyprus later on in the year, which also has some activity and aliveness,
mhm,
kind of I think similar to a Corfu vibe. So yeah,
mhm.
yeah, amazing, bro. I really appreciate what the point of leadership and community that you're holding there in Costa Rica, and yeah, really, it's been beautiful to see from when actually the first time I met Holos was when I almost bought a big piece of land just right down the street from you, which ended up falling apart. But yeah, it's amazing to see what Holos has developed into, and beautiful to feel your spirit, and yeah, just the point that you're holding in all of this crazy world that we're in.
Thank you. Yeah, and you've always got a place to stay here. The house will be done in May, so whenever you want to come back down, you're welcome.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, Costa Rica usually. Yeah, it has, last year I was teaching there, but usually once or twice a year it seems to calm me down there. So I'm sure there'll be
Great.
another time sometime soon.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Great to
Amazing.
catch up.
Amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And people that want to reach you, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, you can find out about Holos at holos.global. I have a website, Ian-Michael Hébert.com. And then also Instagram is the same, holos.global or Ian-Michael Hébert, Hebert. Yeah,
Amazing.
please reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for listening. And if there's questions or comments or things that you'd like to find out more from either myself or Ian-Michael, please share below. And thank you for tuning in to Love, Sex, and Leadership. See you next time.